Let us take tonight and talk about the Prozor DAC01S DAC. So I don't really need a DAC. I don't. I've got 3 or 4 of these things lying around, or DACs, I should say, not these. But I picked this up because I had some Amazon store credit. I thought it would be neat to check out this product. People seem to talk about it relatively highly in terms of sound quality and this type of thing. Hans Beckhausen, the fellow hi-fi YouTuber, reviewed a similar model a few years back, and he said it was fantastic. The Amazon reviews for this seem to say it's fantastic. So I thought, hey, why not? It can't really hurt. Now, of course, there are 2 different versions of the DAC01S from Prozor. There is a plastic shelled model, which runs for about $11.29. And then, of course, there's the model I got, which is the aluminum shelled model for a couple of dollars more. Anyway, let's take and look around it, and then we'll take and look inside it, and then we'll talk about sound quality and all those types of things. Well, let's look around it, of course. Here's your top. You've got headphone out, power indicator when you've got it plugged in. It is important to run this off a 5-volt 1 amp. They make that explicitly clear in the instructions. You got your RCA output jacks, you got your optical in, coax, and of course your power in, your 5-volt. Now, these 2 are sort of independent of one another, but they're kind of connected together. So if you were to try to run 2 inputs in, I do believe, if I remember correctly, the coax takes precedent over the optical. But anyway, let us look around inside of it. Taking this thing apart is actually quite simple. There's really just one screw holding this top plate on, and then you can see the inside of it. So let's take and open her up here. Now, bear in mind, I do not have any sort of macro lens, so you're going to get as good as I can make it, okay? And you just sort of slide it open. As you can see, pops right open. There's your top shell. There's the inside. Now, you've got a few different chips here. I looked them up to kind of identify them. So you have this. This is the this is sort of your Cosmos sensor, your CMOS sensor, Cosmos. This is your CMOS sensor here. Basically, it governs the input data from both the Toslink and optical in, and then that feeds it over to this small chip here. This small chip, of course, is the DAC. Now, it is a GC4344. Now, if you look that up, it's actually made by a company called Global Ship or Ship Global or something like that. It's a chip manufacturer. However, if you look at the specifications of the GC4344 and compare it directly to the CS4344, an older DAC, very highly regarded by Cirrus Logic, you'll find that they're actually roughly the same chip. Basically, it's a low-power DAC, meant 10-pin variant, meant to be used with low-power applications, such as inside of a cell phone or something like that, or a low-power DAC, such as this. Again, it'll run anywhere between 3.3 volts all the way up to 5 volts in terms of power. Now, you've got an op-amp here. Here's basically your output. And basically a few caps here, and of course your headphone socket. Now, one thing that comes across in several of the negative reviews of this device is people talk about low volume. Now, I read numerous reviews that were like that, where people on Amazon, where people talk about it being, you know, low volume. And then one guy specifically said that, oh, people are doing that because they're using the headphone out and not the LCR, not the RCA outs. So use the RCA outs and you get proper volume. However, in either case, the headphone output is definitely a lower volume. I'm not sure of the circuit here exactly, but it is a lower output. Now, there are some traces running off of the op amp going over to the headphone amp. You can see them here. This doesn't appear to be a dual layer board, but it probably is. In any case, you know, I can see a couple of traces running over there, and they are running into these capacitors and a couple of these resistors off the capacitors here. I have a terrible thing there you can see on the side, and a couple over here for both the left and right channel. For whatever reason, though, the headphone output is noticeably lower in volume than the RCA, but even still, the RCA is a lower output. Now, this chip, specification-wise, is reckoned to put out 2 volts, which is your standard, voltage output in terms of gain. However, for whatever reason, this circuit here, and maybe what this op amp is doing, is causing it to even be a lower volume, beyond 2 volts. But anyway, let us take and we'll talk about sound quality and pros and cons and stuff. And anyway, let's do it. All right, so I did forget to mention in the box, of course, you get a little instruction guide. Obviously, you get the DAC. You do get a power cable. Now, it is a 5-volt DC connector to USB. Again, it doesn't come with a power supply, but they do recommend, and it says it a few times in the manual, that you power it off a 1 amp, 5-volt 1 amp source. You also get a little 1 meter length RCA, a toss-link cable. It's actually a pretty nice one, kind of thick. The connectors fit really nicely. Actually, a good job with that. But anyway, what do I think about sound quality with this? I think it's actually pretty good. It's not too bad. It's not overly etchy or bright or strident or any of these things that I've experienced in the past with ultra-low budget DACs. In my experience with ultra-low budget DACs, we're talking $6, $7, up to $20. They tend to be pretty crap. They tend to be very lightweight sounding in terms of like tonal mass and just the sort of the meat of music, if you understand what I mean. They tend to be very low mass in that respect. They don't tend to have much meat on the bone type of thing. But this one actually sort of bucks the trend a little bit. I wouldn't call it super duper. I do think something like an iFi DAC, like the Zenair DAC. Of course, that one's USB only, but I digress. Something like that, of course, or the good old standard ship Modi, whichever version they're up to at this point. You'll get a lot more solidity, a lot more solidness to the sound, a lot more meat on the bone, as I've said. But this one actually isn't terrible. I think for the purpose that this is used for example, for like television watching, which is the whole idea. You have maybe a newer television, for example, and it only has like an optical output. Well, you can buy this for $13, $15 with tax and all, and hook this up, run it out to your stereo or some powered speakers or something like that. And Bob's your uncle, you're good to go because you've got, improved sound quality. And I think in that perspective, from that perspective, I think it actually does a tremendous job in terms of sound quality. It isn't bad at all. Now, it doesn't have the greatest sound stage, particularly with music. Again, TV watching is one thing, but when we come back to, hey, let's listen to music, sound staging isn't so hot. It kind of has a lightweight bass, sort of a hollow bass, if you understand what I mean. But it's not terrible. It's satisfactory. But anyway, let's talk about the con, and there is one con with this thing. So, man, this thing kind of has a smell to it. I don't know what it is. It's sort of like an electronic smell, but not the good old-fashioned electronic smell. It kind of has almost like a burnt metal smell. Can't really describe it. Actually, burnt metal is probably the closest thing I can think of. But yeah, what is the con to the Prozor DAC? Well, it is low volume. As I mentioned in our breakdown of the circuit board inside, it is low volume. I run this thing through, I've got an older shit Modi, the Modi 3 Plus, I think it is. I can't remember. But I have one of those, and running that, now that thing is true 2 volts out. I've measured it. It's straight 2 volts. Running the television into that versus this results in a noticeable 15 to 20 dB drop in terms of gain. And that is with using the RCA out. So now when you use the headphone out, it drops it down even further to maybe like a 35 dB drop. So kind of significant there. Now I don't have numbers or graphs to back that up. You'll just have to trust me. But both of them, most noticeably the headphone out, but also the RCA out, they have some sort of drop in gain. Now technically, as I said, the 4344 chip is supposed to put out 2 volts, but for whatever reason, the analog output stage here is dropping that down a bit. I don't know why, but it is. And yeah, so it is what it is, I guess. What are you going to do? But overall, that is really my only con. For $13, it's a solid little piece of gear. And so yeah. So overall thoughts with the Prozor DAC, it's not bad. Although I don't think I'd buy this again. Now, I will put it up on screen. This is the Insignia DAC. You can pick them up from Best Buy. They double the price. They're $30 all day, every day. But I've had that DAC. I bought it one time. Just like this, I was going to review it, but I never did for various reasons. But, suffice it to say, that one definitely puts out a true 2 volt. And it sounds just as good. And you don't have the con of the the lower output volume and the lower output voltage. And so, yeah, I mean, overall, it's not a bad product, but for just a little bit more money, you can get better. But that said, though, it's not terrible. If you're looking for something to hook up your TV, I technically wouldn't use this for musical audio. It's not bad. But, it's just not my cup of tea. I think there are better products for just a little bit more if you don't mind spending an extra few bucks. But yeah, not bad, but not great either.